friend that has dementia diagnosed 2 weeks ago. I heard as I was looking for helping his family, helping him, he fell and has blood in his brain. And what I found so interesting was he went over, I don't want to mention the names of the hospitals, but he went to a hospital and they said they couldn't handle him and they were going to transfer him. And it took 7 days for the transfer. Okay? So the system has some problems, but once they did transfer him, the studies that they had and the things that they were able to do are phenomenal. So you have top shelf healthcare in Pittsburgh. There's no doubt. But use it. That's part of what we're going to talk about today. All right, so this is going to be controversial. How's that sound? And why is that? I'm independent. So no one tells me what to do, no one tells me what to say, no one tells me what I can or cannot tell you. Does everybody understand that? So what you're going to hear today, you've never heard before, but you're going to hear it. Is everybody with me? Okay. I can't tell you a joke, I was late. Maybe at the end. All right, so we're going to talk about causes, and we're going to talk about diagnosis. Okay, one thing that I want to set up so that people understand my experience, I opened the first Alzheimer's facility in Pittsburgh. It was Arden Courts, North Hills. It was 1991. And I started the Alzheimer's, what do we call it? Support group. And it's still there, once a week, okay? And that kind of dovetails into these two things. That the biggest problem with Alzheimer's disease from my time with patients and now my time with the personal friend, the patient's fine. Does everybody follow me? They're in a different state of mind, but they're fine. The problem is the caregiver, not the problem. The concern is the caregiver, okay? And I've seen the whole gambit. But what was unique was my personal friend, his wife got upset. I told you that, I told you that, I told you. I'd hear that like 20 times in 5 minutes sitting down for a coffee. So I took her aside once and I just said to her, I said, you know he's not doing that on purpose. Yes, he is, I told him that. So what happens is, what I see, there's a change in the culture of where you're living. So a person that gets Alzheimer's disease, they didn't do anything on purpose. A lot of it's genetic. And yet once they get into this state, when their memory changes, their life changes. How does their life change? I was at my friend's house for Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden he looked at his wife and he goes, "You're treating me like a child." And I thought that was so amazing. Why did he think that? She had to change him. She had to clean him up. What's that? It's a child. And then I was reminded of my grandfather's words. Twice a child, once a man. The cycle of life. Okay? So I like to give everybody that because I've looked into it long before now, but I'd say in the last 6 months, I've spent a lot of time paying attention to all aspects of memory, all aspects of the causes, all aspects of diagnosis. And then we're going to talk about treatments, let's just say research, and how would I describe it best? Let's say cost, because everybody's talking about cost now. And I'll give you one little thing that keeps everybody awake. One of the new drugs that is found to work, that's the price tag per month. Those you can't see, that's $32,000. Okay? So who said healthcare wasn't a business, right? All right, so how I want to set all this up, because by the end of this, what I want everybody to understand is, what is dementia? How does it get diagnosed? And a lot of times, how does it get missed? What are the causes? And you're going to be amazed at this. Here, I'll put one in that was proven. Okay? And what does it do? It breaks down myelin. You know the reason we're doing all this, by the way, Jim didn't give me enough paper. Otherwise, I'd have been through 10 pieces of paper on it. All right? But seriously, and that's why I said this is controversial. You're not going to hear it anywhere else. Statins. You know, so any statins you take for the lowering your cholesterol. And if you think about it, that's what's kind of interesting. What does it do? It decreases the lipids in your body. What do all nerves have? Myelin. What is it? A lipid. Is everybody with me? Okay, now, the one thing that I will say as a physician, because a lot of times the patient will say, well, that has too many side effects, okay? We don't have the patient come in the room and automatically say we're giving the patient these 4 medications today. You wait till you see the patient, talk to the patient, examine the patient, and then you come up with a plan to treat the patient. And unfortunately, it's a balancing act between side effects and benefit. Okay, so keep all that in mind as we talk. Okay, so now, what did I do? I looked to see, this is the diagnosis part. So we'll put dementia, and we'll put diagnosis. How is it determined? Let's go back to dementia. The best term for dementia that I found is a change in activities of daily living with memory impairment. Okay? Does everybody follow that? What are ADLs? Activities of daily living. What is that? Bathing, dressing, cooking, cleaning, toileting, and then we'll put more down here, hygiene. Okay? And we'll put dementia, comes in 3 flavors: mild, moderate, and severe. Who knows mild? The person that's with the patient knows mild. Do they know mild? No. Why? Patients with mild dementia can fool you. It's called confabulation. They just talk. Okay? So you ask them, what time are you going to church tonight? And they'll say, oh, they're doing a lot of stuff at church, but I'm going tonight. And that usually stops the person that asked the question from asking anything further. So what they find is they know there's a problem, and they can disguise it or hide it in such a way that even the person that lives with them or sees them every day can be fooled. Okay? The person I'm talking about, I don't see him every day. Very good friend. I probably see him twice a month at least. And I missed the mild, beginning of the mild, because he had that capability of just talking, and he talked through it. But what we find with the mild is, go back to the ADLs. Are they bathing? That's one of the biggest signs. And again, I missed it. His wife was the one that kept bringing it up to me, and it finally hit me. Because this guy used to take a shower every day. And if he was working around the house and got sweaty, he'd take another shower. And here he wasn't taking showers. And again, she knew, but she's kind of afraid of him, you know, which I'm on the other side. I'm afraid of my wife, okay? But the bottom line is, sometimes in that relationship, there's different ways in which things are approached. But the bottom line is, if bathing changes occur in a patient that you know, you have to think Alzheimer's. That has to be the first thing that you think. You know, could be many different things. So it might turn out that it is not Alzheimer's. But I'm telling you to catch the mild, and that's where all the treatment protocols right now are doing the best. So what we want to do is look at, are they bathing? Okay? The toileting and hygiene for men, are they shaving? Okay? For women, what I see, and it just happened to me Tuesday, I went to see a patient who called my office and said she was sick, okay? So I come walking in the building and I see her in a wheelchair. So I go sign in and sign off all my stuff, and I go to her room, she wasn't there. And I go, well, she said she was sick. She said that she wanted me to come up and see her. Dr. Coppola, she's getting her hair done. And that's when I realized hair done for women is more important than illness. But I was there for a long time, so I got to see her after her hair was done. And of course, what's the first thing I said when I walked in? Sure, you go to see the hairdresser, but you don't want to wait and see for me. So it was all good. But the bottom line, guys, is the toileting, the hygiene, the bathing, and then a big one is dressing as well. This guy used to always wear things that he looked nice. He always had on nice clothes. He always had on clean clothes. That would be a big factor. And all of a sudden, he didn't. I didn't pick it up. I didn't see it. Twice a month, I'd stop to see him. You know, it was one of those things I missed on a personal friend. But as I talked to the wife, when she brought up the bathing problem, that's when we found out dressing was a big factor. Cooking and cleaning, these are people that are usually single, live in an apartment, and that's when, if someone won't let you into your apartment, be concerned, why aren't they letting you in? And then if you see something, you gotta say something. Like if you know this person is usually, like I call my wife a neat freak. I saw her one day, she's cleaning the whole house, running around, and she reminds me that the cleaning lady's coming tomorrow. And I go, well, what did you just do? And she goes, I didn't want her to think I was a slob. So again, what it comes down to is, whatever their cleaning style is, you notice if there's a difference. Pay attention to that. It's so important. All right, toileting's another issue. What happens is patients will stop eating, patients will stop drinking, because it's too much of a chore to go to the bathroom, okay? So if you see them start to lose weight, it's another factor. So please, when we get to how are we determining this, these activities of daily living tell you a lot. Men with the shaving. No, I'm playing Santa Claus. I'm not having dementia yet. All right, so remember this. The mild one, we always go to the activities of daily living. When you hit to the moderate, you get, the big one is P, personality. It'll change. Mostly through the mild, the patient is who they are. So if they were mean, you know, like, we always have one of those uncles. Mine's Uncle Joe. He cusses, no matter what, he'll cuss at Christmas again, he always does. So like, the personality, if it changes, you have to pay attention to that, because that could be one of the first signs of moderate. Okay, mild, we find that that stage can be from 1 to 18 months. And a lot of times the person with them doesn't figure it out. Moderate is the longest. We've had patients over 25 years in moderate. What does that mean? That means they're healthy, but because the changes in their mind and their brain, they're not able to do those ADLs the way they used to. But as long as they have good support, they're fine otherwise. You know, when we get into the severe, usually what you're running into with the severe is you're having other medical issues that occur on top of the mountain. So let's say you had previous heart disease for 10 years, you did wonderful, but now all of a sudden you went into congestive heart failure, or you got atrial fibrillation, or something else occurred that now complicates that moderate, you end up into a severe. Severe, very hard to keep the patient home. You all are fine because you're on a campus that has everything, but just to make sure to give you that information, very, very rare severe can be in a regular household. But it can't happen if you have the right, like if there's nurses in the family and things like that. The moderate, once again, it's up to the caregiver. My friend is in the hospital from the bleed. That all seemed to go well. He's gonna go into a rehab unit, and then his wife is putting him into a personal care home. You know, and I would say he's at the mountain, okay? So bottom line is that severe you can't be by yourself or with supervision and thrive. Moderate can last a long time, but there has to be somebody that can cue the patient. What does that mean? If the patient starts to get up and walk someplace, you either have to run after them or you give them different cues. And what that means is you set that up and you talk to them about it. We'll say my patient's name's Joe. Like, okay, Joe, if I say stop, you have to stop. Because if you don't stop, then we're gonna be in trouble because now we have to do X, Y, and Z. So there's different cues that can be done. And then I've even seen people use bells, whistles, clap, yell. I mean, those are the best ones. You know, whenever, and it seems like men get it more than women. And it's amazing when you see the change when I know the patient for 20, 30 years and how they have to handle the patient. Like the quietest ladies I've ever seen in my life never said boo. And all of a sudden, what comes out of their mouth to get the attention of the patient is pretty remarkable. But again, you have to understand this concept to realize what we're dealing with, okay? So now we get into 2024. I'm gonna say always dementia because it works for both. But Alzheimer's, I have to share some physiology with you so you understand it, okay? So we're gonna draw, this is Joe. He looks pretty good, okay? And this is the spinal cord. This is the cerebellum, sits back here in the brain. And this is what's called the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe. And then out here on the side, I'll draw it in dots. This is the temporal lobe, frontal lobe. This is personality, this is movement, this is sight. That's memory, okay? And what happens now is the nerves themselves, they run in what we call neurofibrils. This is how they run. With Alzheimer's disease, you end up with neurofibrillar, I always say that wrong, tangles. What does that mean? See how straight everything is? All of a sudden, they get tangled up. What does that come from? Some theories that are out there. What do I promote? Water. The brain is 90% water. If you get dry, they will move. Is that the only reason? No. There's other reasons that they call them antioxidants. These are charges in the body that they can cause complications such as mutations that can lead to this. But once again, these fibers, and remember how we did, look at the G. While you're looking at that G, bring your finger into your left eye. That's 350 milliseconds. That's how fast it goes. The nerve from the top of your head to your right big toe is the longest nerve in the body. Wiggle your big toe. As you just wiggled that big toe, that was 350 milliseconds it took to send that traveling. What happens when this gets tangled? It's like my traffic coming here. You can't go as fast, right? I hit every light. And then you ever have those people in front of you that they can go and they don't? That's what drives me crazy. But the bottom line is, these are what the fibers are supposed to look like. This is what happens to them. And when it happens, what occurs? The signal slows down. If the signal slows down, what happens to the patient? They slow down. So if you have a patient or a friend, not a patient, friend, acquaintance, somebody you know, if you knew what they were like and they were jump up and walk around and do different things, and now you see they're not moving, or if they are moving, they're moving slower, another sign. And these are things that we don't always necessarily look for. That's why I bring them up. And then I like to show you the physiology. Everything happens in the temporal lobe. For those of you that like music, listen to it. I have a friend of mine, Dr. Wapinski. He invented the PET scan. He was in UCLA when they invented it. And he's seen thousands of brain scans. My father had, he was a musician and he was directing a play and he had amnesia. And long story short, when they checked his brain, Dr. Wapinski told me it was the largest temporal lobe he'd ever seen. And what was interesting, my father had an orchestra at the age of 14. And he made us all play musical instruments. So there's no doubt that the music stimulates the temporal lobe. This is where the memory part is. So you want to do things that stimulate music, sound. It doesn't have to be always music, but listening to nice sounds. I don't know if you guys have seen those machines that have running water or rain. The same thing, sound goes to the temporal lobe, okay? So do your best to keep that as strong as it can be. This is the concept of what's going on in the brain that I wanted everybody to understand, so that you end up with these signals, they change, things slow down, then you see memory changes. I forgot what I came in the room for. I forgot so-and-so's birthday. I don't remember. And I'm hearing this from young people, very young people. And I don't know, my father once said to me, he didn't know and I knew he knew. And so I gave him grief about it. And as I'm giving him grief, he goes, I hope you get to my age. Let me tell you what a memory is. A memory is a file cabinet. And so I got to open a drawer and I got to go back through to find out what you're asking. So what do I tell you? I don't know, because I don't want to open the drawer. So different people have different ways, but the bottom line is this slows down. The signal slows down. The memory changes. If we can connect when this is happening, there's a lot of medicines out there that are very beneficial now. And those $32,000 ones, they'll come down. Okay? But the bottom line is identifying it early, like anything. The treatment is better when it's early. All right, so what I want to do is talk about what's new with dementia. Oops, I was going to go on. All right? We'll do new treatments, but we're also going to put new causes. I already told you about the statin. Fluoride, which is interesting. Aluminum. These are, I'll say, additives. To clear the water. Okay? And the data's out if you guys have a computer, Google it, and I would say the most article backing of the information comes from our, what's his name, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I read his stuff about 2 months ago and I was blown away. You know, you want to look at that. It's worth taking a look at, because what this was done for and what has been proven, just like the statin, what has been proven, it's unfortunate is the bottom line, okay? What's the other things we're seeing with dementia? Have you guys heard of DN3? We talked about that last time. Diabetes 1 is a mutation, and you get it when you're a child, somewhere between 6 and 11 years old, and you have to take insulin the rest of your life. And that's how we know that diabetes doesn't cause heart disease, diabetes doesn't cause all these other things, if you keep it controlled. Type 1s have the best control, you know, because they've taken care of themselves since they were, say, 8 or 10 years old. I just saw an article on, I think that the number I saw was active 64 NFL athletes have type 1 diabetes. And I thought that was remarkable. But the point comes down to diabetes doesn't mean that you're gonna have all these complications if you keep it controlled. That's the name of the game. But they're talking about DN2 is when the pancreas quits producing the insulin, and it's usually related to BMI, belly fat, pushing against all the other organs, and what you end up with is you have to control the blood sugar or you're gonna get complications. DN3 is the new term for Alzheimer's related sugar problems. And it all has to do with how the sugar interacts with the cell. And that interaction with the cell can also lead to the tangles. And think about it, both of them. Remember what I said about water? What happens when you have diabetes? You get thirsty, you get hungry. Those are just part of the symptoms. Well, if you're thirsty and you're not drinking, what's gonna happen? You're gonna get dehydrated, and the tissue gets dehydrated. And remember, the brain's 90% water. And once you get that, we end up with problems. So the DN3 that they're talking about wasn't spoken about pre-1985. And what happened in 1983? Fructose corn syrup. It's amazing to me how we don't know what we don't know until the information comes out. So since 1983, fructose corn syrup has been a sugar substitute in America. The products that are, they're in everything, but the biggest ones are candy, sodas, cereal, and believe it or not, alcohol. I was shocked at that. Beer, all beer has fructose corn syrup. I didn't know that. Okay, so are those 4 products used regularly? Yes. And other than the alcohol one, who uses most of them? Children. And it's amazing because if you haven't done it, do it. It's worth it. Do it. We should do it here. I'll talk to Karen. I'll set it up. I'll buy the stuff. You get Coca-Cola today, and then you get Coca-Cola from Mexico, where they still use sugar. And you will not believe the difference in the taste. If I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have believed it myself. It is unbelievable. But once you get used to a certain taste, it's okay. So what I see is that from 1983, 40 years, 41 years, right? 41. If you have a product on the market that you know is 50 times stronger than sugar, that you know the body cannot clear it the way it clears sugar, and you know it's going to cause complications, you have to at least be able to get that $32,000 price down. That's what I see. Because what I'm going to go through with new treatments, there's some really good stuff out there, but it's real expensive today. And what I see, like I said, you're going to hear about diabetes 3, and you're going to hear a lot about it. And unfortunately, from my end, that's something that could have been prevented. All right, I put this other one on here because I want to make sure I spell these names right. Let me get this. K-U, wait a minute. K-U-L, K-U-L-U-N-A, Kaluna. And the other one, I'm not even going to try to spell, but it begins with a D, okay? For this, I have to show you the Alzheimer's. So what happens, we'll go back through those nerves. So you guys all understand those fibrils are supposed to look like this. And now all of a sudden, they're not tangles, but see how they thicken? It's called the tau protein. And this protein forms over the fibrils, and it blocks the signal sending. So remember what I showed you. 350 milliseconds. Wiggle your big toe. That's the longest nerve in your body, and you see how fast it works. All that's going to slow down, especially in the memory lane, which is the temporal lobe. And it all comes from a tau protein that builds up on the fibers, and it stops the transmission. Okay, so everybody understands the concept. All right. New treatments. That one I showed you, I'll put drug K. Okay? It actually breaks down the protein. Developed in Japan, and I think Lilly owns it now. And it's one of the ones, I think it's 26,000. It's a once a month shot for 6 months. And what they've proved, it's real high statistics, like 80%, you're getting liquefaction of these proteins. Now, will you be back to normal? No. But it can definitely stop the progress, and it definitely makes a difference. Things that were slow now speed up, including your thought process, okay? The other one, it begins with a D. And it blocks the production. This is like DJAMKI or something. It blocks the production of the tau protein. Also, Japan, and I don't know, I don't think Lilly got that one, but one of the new ones out there, you know, one of the companies got in with them, okay? So what we have with these new treatments is we understand the fibrils are getting tangled. So untangling them is great, okay? Now, the other stuff that we've identified, remember we talked about the myelin with the statins. So we talked about ways to increase the myelin in the nerve. And they say with AI, artificial intelligence, like my friend I called Joe, his father had dementia. So there's no doubt it's familial. They haven't got into all the genetics with precision, but that's where everything's going. And so they will find more ways in which to treat it. But for this one, understand the myelin. Think about, we don't even see them anymore, everything's underground, but if you think about a telephone pole and the lines, the black on the lines, that would be the myelin. And so that's how 350 milliseconds, we can see that because of how fast everything can travel. Once that myelin starts to break down, it doesn't move that fast. And so products that are out there that are increasing the myelin and stabilizing it are definitely good. I thought this one was interesting. Nicotine. I put my buddy on nicotine patch. It was right before Halloween, so October, major difference. Amazing. And the reason, in the body, we have a spinal cord. And all through the spinal cord, it's called the autonomic nervous system. It's parasympathetic and sympathetic. This is rest and digest, is how we remember this. And this is fight or flight. The chemical receptor is nicotinic and acetylcholine. And what they're finding is it produces the neurotransmitters, serotonin, GABA-butyric acid, epinephrine, norepinephrine. And those are the things that control the speed at which we think. Does everybody understand the concept? So this is being used today. And I have my buddy, I saw such a difference in him, it was incredible. It definitely, it produces the neurotransmitters that are being blocked by those tangles of the fibrils and the tau proteins. So everybody understands that concept. It's out there. My buddy, Dr. Jagiello, my partner, he said get him a 14 milligram patch and cut it in quarters. So he puts a quarter on every day. And it's, what? Here's the difference. I used to come in, what I say, I call him Joe. I used to come in and say, hey Joe, how you doing? And he'd look right at me. And I knew he understood me. But it would take up to a minute. And he'd say, good. When he was over at Passivant, I walked in to see the Steeler game with him on Sunday. I go, hey, how's it going? He goes, they suck that fast. Okay? So the nicotinic receptor stimulated by the nicotine patch has shown to be an improvement. Now, you can't tell your loved one to go out and just buy those patches, but you make sure they talk to the doctor, you know, or see a neurologist, because those are the ones, okay? So you have to understand this, guys, because these things are showing us that we know how, we sort of know why. Genetics has a big factor, but lifestyle. Lifestyle, it's amazing. My grandfather, many, many years ago, he says to me, I had a job with a friend of mine. His father owned U.S. Steel Bridge Division. He was the president. So I had a job. I was 19 years old, that we were going to help out the guys that were welding on these big buildings. And my grandfather goes, you're crazy. You'll be dead before the end of the summer. You won't be able to spend the money. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you're accident prone. You can't do that. So, of course, I get upset. And at dinner time, he says to me, he goes, I'm going to tell you this. He goes, you know how? You'll have a job. You know why? You'll be the boss. And I never forgot that. And what it comes down to is you got to use your mind, and you have to think every day. I had two patients, Helen and Dorothy. I saw them on the same day. One was 101, one was 103. And when I saw Helen was 103, I said, what's your secret? She goes, Dr. Coppola, you have to laugh every day, you have to think every day, and you have to cry every day. And I go, what? And she goes, have you ever seen a movie that brought a tear to your eyes? And I had just watched Brian's song, Gail Sayers, the Chicago Bear guy. I go, she goes, watch it every day, 99 cents Netflix, okay? And then she goes, who gets the mail? And I said, I do. She goes, what do you do with it? I said, I take the checks, give my wife the bills, and I throw away the junk mail. And she goes, read the junk mail. It'll make you think every day. And she goes, and you're a doctor, you know laughter is the best medicine. She said, you watch America's Funny Videos, a half hour a day. That's what I'm gonna tell you is what I'm prescribing for it. And you know what's funny? I did watch it and I laughed. I mean, it definitely brings out laughter. But the whole point is you have to make sure you keep your mind sharp. And you have to make sure that you're, even the junk mail, like, you know, just read something. Whatever it is, read something. Think, make sure you think. You have to think through the course of your day. And as long as you keep those working, as soon as you notice a difference, you gotta get help. I mean, to me, this is as big as back whenever we used to say, if you have chest pain or if you're having a stroke, get to the hospital right away. Save the brain and save the heart. It's the same concept. Remember those ADLs, like the most important thing is when you see the change in any of these functions, that's the time to intervene. That's the time to get the nicotine patch on, because pretty soon some of these other things are gonna be cheaper. And again, I hate beating up the fructose corn syrup or the fluoride, but what we're finding is there's no doubt that it has changed the neuro speed. And that's the biggest thing. I think we all have the capacity. I mean, you can do it yourself while we're sitting here. Think about what you're gonna do at Christmas. Think about all the things you have to do before you get to Christmas. Think about what you're doing the rest of today. Think about what you're doing the weekend. Think about what the weather's gonna be like. We can all do that while we're thinking anything we wanna think. But you have to do that. Your mind has the capacity to multitask and to take in millions of information. You gotta give it to it. I tell people, look up when you're Googling stuff, the memory champion in America, 2022. It was a 77-year-old guy. To qualify, they throw a deck of cards down, you get 60 seconds to memorize it. That's the qualifier. And then to get into the final one where you have all these things that they throw at you. But you can use your mind in your 70s, it's proven, and beyond. There's billions of cells up there. I always tell people, it's like, my brother owned a carpet store, so of course my mother had the best carpets in town, okay? But she had a foyer, and then you had to walk beside the steps to get into the kitchen. And that was the only place the rug was worn, because she wouldn't let anybody in the living room, okay? And that's how your brain is. The pathways were all a product of repetition. We do the same thing every day. But all this other, like all the rug, like it's all still good, but you have to use it. And you have to do multiple things at one time. Just don't think of one thing, think of 10 things at one time, because you have that capacity. And those are the kind of things that are coming out. All right, so the last one I want to leave you with. Okay, you have to stay active. What does that mean? Assume everybody in this room is not active, okay? So tonight put a plan together to put activity in that you're not doing right now. And then make it a habit, because you gotta move. If you're not moving, you're not sending the blood. What happens? If you're seated, whatever your body is tells you, your heart rate, say it's 70, your blood pressure is 120 over 80, you're breathing 14 times a minute. You walk down the hall and back, all that changes. You have to stay active. You have to allow all that blood to circulate. That's the most important thing. So do the activity piece, all right? What makes everything work? The heart and the blood vessels. That's the aorta. And everything branches off to the head, the rest of the body. The kidneys, if you guys remember, we talked about it. Every time the heart beats, it gets a quarter of the blood flow. Okay? So this is very, very important. And what we want is that blood vessel to be wide open. Same blood vessel. What happened? It constricted. What causes constriction of the blood vessel? A lot of things. What's the one thing that happens to most of us daily? I call it noise. Stress. Okay? A lot of data shows that stress is in the lives of probably, I think the data I read was 88%. 88% when the study was done, over 5,000 patients had increased stress. So what happens? Blood vessel clamps down. What happens? Blood pressure goes up. What happens? You don't bathe the whole body in blood and nutrients. A lot of it gets sent someplace else. So you got to keep the stress down. How do you keep the stress down? I can't get anybody to adopt my 6 children. That's what I tried to do. But the bottom line comes down to, this is something you have to pay attention to, because it's a big part of disease, period. So activity you have to increase, and you have to find a way to deal with stress. It's called NuCalm, N-U-C-A-L-M. I had a patient that let me try it. You get in a big stuffed chair, you put those glasses on, so even if you open your eyes, it's black. It was all sound, not music, sound. It was so relaxing. I set my clock for 40 minutes. I said, I'll do 40 minutes. I woke up an hour and a half later. It was on, and it's like, wow, it was so relaxing. So if something like that can relax you, you gotta find something. I'm not saying go buy a NuCalm, but I'm saying, remember the thing I told you about with the rain, the beach and all that kind of stuff? It's definitely relaxing also, and I don't think it's expensive. So find ways to deal with your stress. One that I found was the best stress reliever, and I laughed so hard. I trained at McKeesport Hospital for my internship. And we had a guy from Romania. And this guy was tough. He was my senior resident. And one morning he woke up, he said, "You look terrible." I said, "I was up all night. What happened?" I said, "So-and-so called me on this floor, so-and-so called me on that floor, so-and-so." He goes, "I'll show you how to fix that." I go, "What?" He said, "I'll round with you next time you're on." So next time we were on, I got called, he comes down with me. He wrote 6 pages of orders. Never got called at night again. That's what changed it. But it was stressful. There's always ways to relieve the stress. You have to figure out a way for yourself, and you have to do the things I'm telling you. And then if you notice, like once you get yourself thinking of 5 or 6 different things at a time, periodically through the day, if you're not able to think of those 5 or 6 anymore, that's something you want to talk about. Does everybody understand that? All right. Napping, resting, sleeping. I have patients that'll tell me they sleep 2 hours a night. Do you nap? No. I rest. What is rest? I shut my eyes, but I don't fall asleep. And I thought that was like malarkey, right? You ever tried to lay down with the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old running around? But I found that I still had my eyes shut, and I didn't feel probably as good as if I would have taken a nap. But it was Thanksgiving, I was stuffed, and it's not the turkey that causes you to go to sleep, by the way. But the bottom line is that I think there were some football games on, I'm resting comfortably, and all of a sudden one of the grandchildren like jump over the top of me and kick my head. You know, it wakes you up, and then you're thinking like, oh man, I gotta go somewhere else. So I go in the living room because no one's allowed in the living room. And I heard everything, but it was restful. So that's why I put resting is beneficial. Why? What it does is it relaxes the blood vessels And now, guess what? They get bigger. Does everybody follow me? It's all blood flow, guys. Napping. Is napping good? My grandfather, who's from Naples, napped every single day. Every day. For at least an hour to an hour and a half. He smoked, he drank, and he lived to 96 years old. Sharp. Sharp as a tack. There's no doubt. And the literature will show. They find, I think it was Greece, Italy, and France. And I think they do a nap at lunchtime. You know, but the data is right there. Google it. It shows. They don't have the same dementia problems that we do. They don't have the high heart attack rates that we do. They don't have the stress that we do. It's pretty phenomenal, okay? And then the other one is when it does come to sleep, do you need 8 hours? Answer, it's preferred. Why? Because the blood vessels all dilate and your body heals itself. It can figure out what's wrong. How do you get 8 hours? You got to make yourself get 8 hours. It is so important. How would I best describe it? Probably when I saw it the most was when I played sports. If you had a full night's rest, no matter what the situation was, you were fine. You were able to think clearly, do what you needed to do. If you went out with the boys the night before and you did stupid stuff so that you were half hungover in the morning of the game, it just wasn't the same. You couldn't do what you wanted to do. And so what the sleep does, most importantly, is it enables the body to heal. What does that mean? If you ate a lot of hot stuff and you irritated your stomach and you decide to stay up all night and eat some more hot stuff the next day, probably by the 4th day you're going to have a hole that starts an ulceration in the stomach. If you do that same thing and sleep for 8 hours, you don't get the same results because there's a healing process during that 8 hours. Please pay attention to that because it helps a lot. Now, when I said this was going to be last, but I have to put this down so everybody sees. What I see is the controversy. I'm spelling that wrong, so what do? Scribble. Oh, did you guys ever see this? Here you go, I'll give you a good joke. What's that? Doctors texting. All right, what's the controversy? We're all adults. We all understand what we understand. And what I'm finding is, the statement I would make is, in general, we don't know what we're doing. Okay? All age groups, we don't know what we're doing. And how did I come to that conclusion? Because I watch my children, those little 5-hour drinks, or that big one, Monster, whatever it's called, and as I talk to them and try to reason with them, they argue with me. You're addicted to coffee. That's what they tell me. And I'll say, no, I'm not. When's the last time you went a month without coffee? I couldn't remember that. I started drinking coffee probably when I was with my grandmother. So I drink coffee all the time. But these drinks have high sugar, high caffeine, like things that are just not good for the mind. Why? They dehydrate you. All that stuff has to go out with the urine, okay? So what I find is the controversy, if we know five things that are causing the problem, and we now know how to treat. Remember those tau proteins, guys. The Japanese have figured it out. And you know what I find remarkable? I worked for Dr. Starzl with the Pittsburgh transplant back in the day when I was going to do surgery. And Katsu Yanaga, that was his name. He was from Japan. And Starzl told him when he went home, he says, I want you to go to your family's homes and dig me dirt out of the garden and bring it back. And that's how they found OK4, which is the anti-rejection medication for transplants still being used today. That's what's phenomenal, guys. And so now we know, thanks to the Japanese, how to liquefy that protein. It's so prevalent that we can't yet get rid of it, but we can liquefy it and then stop it from being produced. Those are big, big factors, okay? And so what I want to make sure everybody understands is, I think this is so unfortunate because if indeed fluoride, if indeed some of these other, like fructose corn syrup, if indeed all these things are contributing to what's wrong with the memory, I don't understand how we can't at least look to some of these things that are going on and prioritize those. But I think that's something that we'll keep our fingers crossed that it happens. What I want to leave you guys with was the front page, make sure we went over it all. The ADLs are the biggest things for the diagnosis, okay? The causes, well, I didn't put one in there for good treatment. Vitamin D. What does vitamin D do? Increases your calcium. What reaction occurs in your body every moment of every day and we don't even know it? You guys remember Pac-Man? It used to eat up that guy? They're called osteoclast and osteoblast. While we're all sitting here, everybody's bones are being eaten up and then reproduced. Does everybody follow me? That process is constant. It's like every time, like right now, I left this morning on purpose to look at it. My electric meter, it's like this. When my kids get home next week, and then they leave stuff on, right? So what happens is the same concept. What I want everybody to understand is you have control, but you have to take control. And you know your mind, you know your memory, and please pay attention to these ADLs. And vitamin D, I would recommend if you're out in the sun. Well, we live in Pittsburgh, so you're not going to be in the sun for a few months. So I would definitely take the vitamin D because there's been proof of a beneficial effect, that it helps that process be more efficient and not as, what's the word, frequently changing. Yeah. So pay attention to that because it's important. All right, treatments we talked about, the research, break it down to myelin, the statins. Does that mean I want everybody in here to stop their statins? Not at all. I just want everybody, if today we did nothing else but get the concept of what dementia is, what specifically Alzheimer's is, make sure you pay attention to that Nicoderm, guys, because I've seen it myself now with 5 or 6 different patients. It works. But ultimately, the biggest factor is you know your ADLs. Please, please pay attention to if there's a change. And again, guys, I'll go through it. Like for me personally, before I'm done with today, like I have 6 or 8 things I have to do that are up there. And then before I walked in the door, my wife told me that they didn't pick up the garbage, so pick it up on the way to the office and put it in the dumpster. And then I got 2 kids coming home. One has 2 kids, so I got to make sure the house is childproof before they get home, right? And that's all up here somewhere. So then I go to the office and there's more patients to see. You can do it, is the bottom line, but you have to do it. So find a way to make your mind do many, many things. And you can't do 24/7s, I understand that, but do it so you're not doing it at all now. So do it for 10 minutes. Build it up to a half hour. Build it up to a half hour twice a day. And then if you don't get the exercise, get the exercise. And if there's a big stressor, I threw my daughter out of the house. What year was it? 2019. My wife works out of town. So she texts me, clean the room before I get home tomorrow. And I quickly text back, okay. But then I'm thinking about it going, how the hell does she know the room's not clean? So I text her back and she sends me 4 pictures of my bedroom. So I go, my daughter's name's Maria. I call her Ree. Ree, get in here. What are you taking pictures of my room for? So Mom sees how much of a slob you are. That's what she says to me. And we fight back and forth. I actually made her leave because it was driving me crazy. She was home for the whole summer. So I got her apartment, right? So she has this suitcase bigger than her, and I'm carrying it, and she's crying. And I get over and I throw it in her car, and I give her a hug. And she's like, she looks at me real mean. And I go, do me a favor. Call your mother right now, and you ask her what her nickname for me was when we started dating, and it's still to this day. She goes, okay. So she calls me back and she goes, can I come back home? And I go, why? She goes, it's Pigpen. I'm sorry to have been late, guys, but please, please, please understand what we just went over. You have to use your mind. That old adage of use it or use it or lose it with muscles and such, true. But you have the capacity to multitask. You have the capacity to put 20 things in your mind right this minute and think of all 20 at one time. You have to do that. You have to open it up. You have to use as much of it as you possibly can every single day. And then pay attention, please, pay attention to the ADLs. I mean, some of us just get, like for me, most times I shave a little bit, but now I gotta play Santa, but I'll take it off at some point. And there's times I'll get up and I'll think, oh, I really don't wanna shave. Like those are the kind of things that know you're heading in the wrong direction. So pay attention to your ADLs, and as soon as you see any kind of change in them, make sure you adjust it. Like, oh, I gotta get back to doing this, I gotta get back to that. And if for some reason you can't, remember what I said about stress? What's the biggest diagnosis I make in the month of December? Depression. Is everybody with me? It can hit anybody. And so don't forget that. All right, so make sure, start out with like 5. Pick 5 things. Like, okay, the Steelers are playing Sunday or Saturday at 4:20 or whatever, and I got to go to dinner at this time, and so-and-so called me at this time. Put like 5 things up there and think about them. Try to do it to start 10, 15 minutes a day. And build it up, guys, because it makes a difference. And please listen to sound or music. Not sound of music. Sound or music. And they say, what's it called? Like orchestras, what's that music called? Classic. They say that's the best. Like as you're listening to that music, try to pick out what you're hearing. Like, oh, that's a trumpet. Or, oh, that, just, they say that so develops the temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe's memory, guys. One other thing I'll leave you with is fatty liver is top protein. Does everybody understand that? That's why they're calling it diabetes 3. Our children are on dialysis. Our children are getting kidney transplants. Our children are eating too much fructose corn syrup. And what we end up with, the top protein, is the same concept. Your body can't metabolize it, it forms in there, stops the flow of information, and our memories change. Okay? Any questions, guys?
What about fluoride?
The fluoride, what they're finding is it's an additive in the water, and they say in toothpaste, and what they've been telling us is it helps with the enamel, but they're finding the study, Google it, because the studies are there, they're finding studies that show that fluoride can have an impact on the myelin.
You're telling us to drink more water.
I want you to drink water.
More fluoride.
Well, then I'm gonna tell you, get a Brita. It'll get rid of the fluoride. Yeah, but I'm telling you, drink the water, but get it. I have to do the article by JFK Jr. I think I read it. I'm pretty sure it was October. Like, just look that up because it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But there's ways that you can, don't use fluoride toothpaste. That's a big factor. Don't drink the water. If it's like, if you know locally where it's being done, they'll tell you how much fluoride they're putting it in. And they tell you in that article, like it's like 1 out of so many, there's so many zeros, could be billions. So you can get that information wherever the water's coming from here. But definitely drink water, don't stop.
What kind of toothpaste should we have?
Non-fluoride. I don't know names of them, but non-fluoride. Get the article, RFJ Jr., I'm pretty sure it was October, because it tells you all the stuff that you could do to avoid it. But there's studies now being done. Apparently they were never done before, but they're now starting to be done. That's why I said it's controversial. But remember, diabetes 3, that's a big one. Remember that there's no doubt fructose corn syrup is causing troubles. And remember, for people that you know are just getting it, the Nicoderm patch. But they can't just don't buy them one and put it on. You got to tell them to talk to their doctor. Okay? Any other questions, guys? Thanks for having me. Sorry I had to keep you so late.